Hello BookTube, Sarah here and welcome to my channel. Today I'm coming to you with my 2018 year in review. I am filming this the same day it's going to be posted, which is the 1st of January. So 2018 is officially done and over with. So now I can confidently sit down here and give you guys a recap of my reading year for 2018. So I was debating on how exactly I wanted to do this. I saw a lot of great kind of best of lists and things like that. And that's something that I might want to look into doing in 2019, at the tail end of 2019. But I knew I kind of wanted to do a wrap up of the whole year. And some of my favorite things to look at the end of the year are, of course, my stats. I do keep the spreadsheet, the Let's Read spreadsheet created by, I think it was Let's Read. He has a BookTube channel, not updated very often at all, but I will leave a link in the description box below to the video at the tail end of 2017 where he does this spreadsheet. I altered the numbers for 2019 because I'm using the same spreadsheet in 2019. So if you're interested in keeping track, and it does keep track of so many different stats. Like I just, hit the tip of the iceberg with some of the stats that I give you guys, and I've altered them in some spots. There's one column that talks about publisher. So essentially when you buy or read a book, what publishing house did it come from? I changed that to Harlequin imprints. So I fill that in with the different Harlequin imprints that I read, throughout the year or what have you. So at the end of every month when I do my month-end wrap-up, I give you guys my stats for the month. And I do plan on doing that in December. So watch next week. There will be a video for my December month-end wrap-up. But I did want to do this one too. It's not, I thought about it and I was looking at everything, and it really doesn't, one doesn't affect the other. Do you know what I mean? December is separate from the end of the whole year. And I do want to give just the stats and kind of a breakdown on all the books that I read in December. In this video here, I am going to go through all my stats. So all the stats that I would normally, like I was saying, go through at the end when I do my month-end wrap-ups, I'm going to do them all here, but these numbers are reflecting the entire year, not just a single month. And then I started to think about, I did want to talk about some of the books that I read this year. I mean, I read a lot of books this year. I'm not going to sit down here and talk about all of them, but I decided to just focus on my 5-star reads. So at the end of the video, like after I go through my stats, I'm going to go through, I'm not going to give any kind of review on all of these books, but I'm going to quickly talk about all the books that I labeled as 5-star reads for 2018, because I absolutely think that they completely deserve a mention. Stats. Let's jump into it. So in 2018, I read a grand total of 298 books. I finished my last book of the year yesterday on the 31st, and I seriously debated when I was sitting here. I'm like, I bet you any money I could sit down and finish either 2 comic books or 2 Babysitter's Club books or something like that to push my my total for the year up to 300. And I thought, no, let's not pad numbers. You know what I mean? Like, I just thought, let's leave it at 298. My goal for 2019 is 300 books, and I'm extremely happy with that. But as I posted yesterday, I made a post to Instagram, and I said not only was it the quantity of books that I read, there was really great quality of books that I read this year. And that will be reflected when I get into my star ratings. But my Goodreads goal was 240 books. So I was 58 books above my Goodreads goal, which is 124%. So super, super fantastic. I'm really, really pleased with that. So into my star ratings. And again, as you can see, I read a lot of good books this year. I had only one 1.5 star book. I had 0 1-star books. 1 star to me is a DNF, and I didn't have any DNFs this year. 3 2-star books, 5 2.5 star books, 43 3-star books, 103 3.5 star books, 101 4-star books, 25 4.5 star books, and 17 5-star books. So those 17 5-star books, again, I will talk about at the end of this video. So as you can see, like a good chunk of the reading that I got done were between 3 and 4.5 stars. So that's pretty super fantastic. I've been thinking about this over the last week or so, and I think I mentioned this in another video. The one thing that, because I've heard a lot of people will comment in videos of mine and say, I'm really stingy when it comes to star ratings. It made me start thinking to myself, do I just am I too free with star ratings? Do I just here's a 4-star, here's a 4.5 star. You know what I mean? Like, give star ratings, like, not frivolously, but you know what I mean. And then I started thinking, 17 5-star books in the course of a year when you've read 298 books, that's not a huge percentage. So when I rate a book 5 stars, I think the defining factor to go from 4 or 4.5 stars to a 5-star is rereadability. Will I reread this book? Is this a book, because as you guys know if you watch my channel, 90% of what I read is ebook or audiobook. Is this a book that I will go and buy a physical copy of, put it on my shelf so I can have it because I do have very limited shelf space? And is this a book I will think about rereading at some point? Or is it, you know what I mean? So that's how I decide on that 5-star rating, in case you guys are curious. Like, you know, what takes it from a 4.5 to a 5-star? So let's break it down into genres that I read. Because, well, contemporary romance is obviously the #1. There are a lot of different genres that I read this year, and I'm really pleased with that. So for contemporary romance, it was 163 books. Romantic suspense, 35. Historical romance, Regency, 22. If you're new to my wrap-ups, I do break down the time periods of historical romance. Just for me, just for fun, just to see if they lean one way or the other. And obviously Regency comes out on top this year. Cozy mysteries, I read 12 of them. Paranormal romance, I read 11. Mysteries, I read 10. Chick lit / women's fiction were 8. General fiction were 6. Now, general fiction, I need to try and find a new genre for this, and these are mostly the Babysitter's Club books. I'm not sure, would it just be middle grade fiction? And that's what I'm thinking I'm going to label those for 2019, just so I kind of know what they are. Historical fiction, I read 5. Nonfiction for history, I read 5 books, so that was exciting. Historical romance, American West, I read 4. Inspirational romance, 4. 4 thrillers I read this year. 2 erotica novels. 1 magical realism novel. And for each of these next 5, it was for 1 book. So historical romance, Tudor, medieval, Civil War, World War II, and the 1920s. Like I said, each one of them, I read a single book in that genre. And for nonfiction memoir, I read 1. So into my Harlequin imprints. So these are the imprints put out by Harlequin every month. Your Blaze, your Desire, the special editions, all of those. I do like to keep track of how many I read. And this was kind of an eye-opener that I'm surprised that it swung so heavy for a couple different imprints. But I think that's because for these imprints I was reading series in them for the Stacking the Series Challenge last year. And it'll be the same for this year. Sorry, but I mean like for different imprints, sorry. So for Harlequin Intrigue, 15 books. Desire was 12. Special edition was 11. The Love-Inspired Suspense was 7. Historical, 6. Super Romance was 6. Love-Inspired, just the regular Love-Inspired, were 6. Harlequin Romance were 5. Harlequin Western Romance was 4, which is what used to be the American Romance line. Romantic Suspense, the Harlequin Romantic Suspense, which used to be the Silhouette Intimate Moments, were 3. The Blaze novels were 2. They are still my favorites. The Nocturne books, 2 of them actually. The Harlequin Dare, which is their erotic line, I read 1. The Harlequin Heartwarming was 1, and the Harlequin Kiss line was 1. So yeah, so like I said, you know, there's some of them that had a whole bunch, and then some I only read like 1 out of. So it's definitely something I like to look at, that, you know, for the year to come, do I want to kind of look more at those lines, the lines I didn't read as many of this year. So for age group, I read 277 books geared towards adults, 15 YA novels, which surprised me. I didn't think it was that high, 3 middle grade, 2 new adult, and 1 children's novel. And for years, you know, what year the book was published essentially, I read 1 book that was published prior to the 1920s, 6 books that were published in the 1930s. Those were the original Nancy Drew series. 1 book published in the 1960s. I believe that was one of the first Cat Who books that I reread. 1 book published in the 1970s, which I think was an old Harlequin. 10 books published in the 80s, which would have been the Nancy Drew Files and the Babysitter's Club. 4 books published from the 1990s. 20 books published in the 2000s. 197 books published between 2010 and 2017. If you could not tell, Yes, I am a backlist reader. And this one surprised me, and I was happy with this number. 58 books published this year in 2018. So that's great. Reading the NetGalley books now are really, because like I said, I am a backlist reader. I read so many backlist books that I don't read a lot of new releases. So it's great that I'm reading these new releases and can obviously recommend them to you guys, you know, in my videos every week. So this one is no surprise. Audiobooks. I read 153 audiobooks this year. Ebooks, 127. So I had more audiobooks than ebooks, which is usually the way it goes. And I had 18 paperback novels, which was kind of fun. 287 of the books that I read were novels. 10 books that I read were novellas, and one was a poem. And that came at the end of the year. Just a few weeks ago in December, I read A Night Before Christmas for the holiday book bingo. This one's fun. So out of all the books that I read this year, 227 of those books were part of a series, right? I'm a series reader, obviously. 71 were standalone. Of those 227 books, this is bad, 80 books were the start of a brand new series. So I started 80 new series this year. 133 of those 227 books were part of ongoing series. So that's not bad. This number I'm disappointed in. I'd like to raise this number in 2019. I only completed 14 series this year. I started 80. It would be great if those numbers were reversed, just so I can make a huge dent in my series list. So this is a new one. I saw Steph at Stephanie's Romantic Book Talk she mentions this one in her weekly wrap-ups every week. She talks about the number of audiobook hours that she has listening. Now, I always went with the number of pages read. I use the Kindle edition for pages read even when I listen to a book on audio. But I thought, I'm not counting this number towards any sort of goal. It's just more for fun to see how many hours of audio I actually listen to in the course of a given month. So I am going to start using the stat going forward, but it's not counting towards a page goal or anything like that. It's more just, you know, for funsies, just to hear what it is. So for my hours of audio for 2018, it was 1,404 hours and 48 minutes. And I listen to my audiobooks at 2 times speed most of the time. And the actual listening hours were 702 hours and 2 minutes. I love me some audiobooks. My total page count for the year, 89,102 pages, which works out to be approximately 244 pages a day. Not too shabby. So yeah, so I'm super pleased with that. So like I said, let me just quickly tell you guys, not quickly, let me go through my 5-star reads. All right, so here are my 5-star reads for 2018. These are in order that they were read. They're not in any particular order, like my favorite 5-star read is the last one that I'm going to mention. Nothing like that. Totally in order of when they were read. Excuse me. So the first one, The Perfect Match by Kristen Higgins. Kristen Higgins appears on this list a couple times. She is my favorite author. And I had, just a little side note, a complete thrill the other day when on the Read Bliss Facebook group, if you guys don't belong to it, you should absolutely go and join. They had asked the question, what's your favorite funny book? And I posted a book by Kristen Higgins and I tagged her. I don't know how often she's on Facebook. I just kind of tagged her just because. And she replied back thanking me for that. So that was kind of a thrill. But yeah, this is the second book in the Blue Heron series. It is a contemporary romance and I love this book so much. Next up, Hungry Heart by Jennifer Weiner. This is the memoir that I read in 2018. And this one I read just because I was looking through my library's audiobooks that were currently available, and this one came up. And I was familiar with the author's name, but I still haven't read any of her books yet. But this was absolutely fantastic. She has such an interesting childhood and, growing up and things like that. Even if you're a fan of her work or not, I absolutely encourage you to read her memoir because it was so good. And she narrates it herself on audio and she does a fantastic job. The next one, Winter Garden by Kristen Hanna. This is a reread. This one was a reread for me this year. This is one of my favorite books. I read this years ago, again on a whim, and I loved it. It is a historical fiction novel, and it's about 2 sisters whose father has just passed away, and he encourages their mother to tell them the fairy tale. They always used to get told the fairy tale when they were kids, but it never ended. Like they got to a point and then the mother would just stop telling it. Well, it turns out to be the story of what life was like for her living in Russia during World War II, during the occupation or the siege on St. Petersburg. Heartbreaking, amazing. I mean, it's Kristen Hanna, if you're familiar with her work. This is one of her older novels. I know her newer ones tend to get a lot more buzz, but I absolutely recommend that you go back and read this one because it's fantastic. The Friends We Keep by Susan Mallory. Another, this is more of a women's fiction novel. I believe this is the first book in the, no, it's not. I think it's the second book in the Girls of Mischief Bay series. Fantastic series about friendships and love, and it's Susan Mallory. Again, absolutely fantastic. Sit, Stay, Love by Debbie Burns. This is the first book in the Rescue Me series. I read this one earlier this year for NetGalley, and I loved it. This is a series that, a contemporary romance series that centers around a no-kill animal shelter. And this first book was just heartwarming, and I loved it. And if you love animals, especially dogs, go and pick up the series. Another book in this series shows up on this list as well. Diary of a War Bride by Laurie Robinson. This was a surprise. I thought I would enjoy it. I didn't think I would love it as much as I did. What really set this one apart for me is that with most romance, either contemporary or historical or whatever the case may be, there is an element of not being completely grounded in reality. Let's be honest. You know, the chance of you meeting this super hot guy or whatever the case may be, they're not 100%. Do you know what I mean? And that's fine. That's why we love them. But this one, to me, could have been the story of your grandparents or your great-grandparents. It's about an American soldier who is stationed in the UK during World War II, and he meets a local girl, and it's their relationship. That's the most simplified version of it. You get diary entries from her, and it's just, when I finished it, all I kept thinking was, to me, it's as if the author found her great-grandmother's or grandmother's diary in the attic and then wrote the book. It's wonderful, absolutely wonderful, and I highly recommend it. It's a great World War II romance novel. The next one is One More Summer by Liz Flattery. This was another contemporary romance, and it was a lot of fun. This one was about a woman who's been spending most of her life looking after her ailing father, and she has brothers, and it's about the summer after her father passes away. He was not the nicest person, so she's now kind of out from underneath his thumb, and she's learning to live a little, and it's a second chance romance. This one was great. The writing on this was fantastic. This was part of the Audible romance package, so I absolutely recommend that you go and check it out. Really great romance story. The next one was Now That You Mention It by Kristen Higgins. Again, I told you Kristen Higgins would show up on this one again. This is more of her women's fiction / chick lit type novel. Not your typical contemporary romance. There is a romance in this novel, but I absolutely recommend that you read this one. This one, you know, in typical Kristen Higgins fashion, had me laughing, had me crying. Highly recommend. Next up, Rainy Day Friends by Jill Shalvis. This is book 2 in the Wildstone series. I want to say it's book 2. Yeah, because Lost and Found Sisters is book 1, and I read that one in 2017. So yes, this was a new release as of this year. This one, like I said, second book in the series, but you do not have to read the series in order. They are actually completely separate stories. And this one was just amazing. Again, this is not your typical Jill Shalvis contemporary romance novel. This is bordering more on the women's fiction chick lit. I don't want to say chick lit. When I think chick lit, it's humorous. These are, while there are funny bits in it, when I think that, I think Sophie Kinsella. This is not a Sophie Kinsella. This is more a women's fiction novel, you know, about, that centers more around friendship and family than it does about romance. And next up, Map of the Heart by Susan Wiggs. I love this book so much. This is another one that is kind of told in a dual timeline, and it goes back to World War II occupied, or France in World War II, to America modern day, and the story of family and secrets, and oh, just, I absolutely love this one. I did this one, was this one? No, I know a few other people read this one after I had read it. I know there was a little bit of a not quite a consensus on, you know, some people didn't like it, some people did like it, and that's absolutely fine. I personally thought it was fantastic. And yeah, if you're interested in it, definitely check it out. Next up, The Night Mark by Tiffany Rice. This one, I was surprised to like it as much as I did. I am a fan of Tiffany Rice's work, but this one was so entertaining and so interesting. Another one that is told in a dual timeline, but this is also a time travel romance, and it is about a woman who ends up at this lighthouse and ends up going back in time. And she kind of takes over for a person that they think has died. I don't want to give too much of this one away. This was fabulous. I absolutely recommend it. Really, really interesting. You know, it really makes you kind of question time and you know, if time travel were possible, you know, would these kind of things work? Loved it, loved it, loved it. Definitely check it out. Just One of the Guys by Kristen Higgins. Still my favorite. This was a reread for me. I think this is the third or fourth time that I've read this book. Hands down, it is still my favorite Kristen Higgins novel. There are some scenes in here that are laugh out loud, and other scenes, like towards the end, that no matter how many times I read this book, will have me in tears. It's wonderful. And my mother just read it for the first time earlier this year too. She hadn't read it yet. And she told me afterwards she just was gushing about it and how fantastic it was. Again, one of her lesser known works, but I absolutely recommend that you check it out. The Christmas Sisters by Sarah Morgan, right over here. Loved, loved, loved this book. I thought it was absolutely fantastic. Again, delving away from what Sarah Morgan is typically known for with her contemporary romance and moving more into the women's fiction side of it. Story of three sisters at the holidays who are all dealing with different circumstance, and wonderful story. Bellevue by David Oshinsky, a historical nonfiction novel. I read this one for Nonfiction November. This was also a reread for me. I read it years ago on ebook. This time I listened to it on audio. Essentially, this is the story of Bellevue Hospital in New York City, and also the history of medicine and things like that. Really fantastic. If you are into any kind of medical history, I absolutely recommend that you check this one out. My Forever Home by Debbie Burns, the other book that I mentioned that shows up on this list. This is the third book in the Rescue Me series. This one broke my heart in parts, but also, you know, was very uplifting as well. It is the story of two people who are trying to find this, he's not a missing dog, but a homeless dog, and they want to bring him in and catch him and give him his forever home. But there are parts of this book that are told from the perspective of the dog. And it's just, like I said, it breaks your heart when you read some of it. But again, on the other flip side, absolutely uplifting as well. Great book. Again, if you are a dog lover, check the series out. One Day in December by Josie Silver. I read this one very recently and I loved it so much. This is the story about a woman who is taking the bus home after a Christmas party at work, and the bus is stopped at the bus stop, and she spies a guy out the window, and the two of them kind of have that instant flash of, you know, oh my gosh, lightning strike kind of an idea. And before he can get on the bus to meet her, the bus leaves. So she spends the next year looking for him in all different places, at the bus stops, at the clubs, at the bars, or whatever the case may be. And then finally a year later she meets him at a Christmas party that her and her roommate are hosting. And he is her roommate's new boyfriend. And that's all I'm going to tell you. It was a great, great story. I will admit the ending had that very rom-com movie kind of ending, but it was still fantastic and I absolutely recommend it. And last but not least, my final 5-star rate of the year. This one was easy. I could not give this book 5 stars. It wasn't even a book, it's a poem. The Night Before Christmas by Clement Clark Moore. I read this one, as I said, for the holiday book bingo. It was just fabulous, you guys. I've read this poem 100 times, and every time I've read it, I just love it. And if you actually have not read this poem, I recommend it. I listened to it on audio from Audible. It's free to listen to, and it's narrated by the country music group Rascal Flatts, which makes it just a little bit more fun. It's 5 minutes long. It's free. Go ahead and take the time and listen to it, because I absolutely recommend it. And anyway, guys, that is it for this video. I do hope that you enjoyed it. Please let me know in the comments below, you know, how many 5-star books did you guys have this year? Or what was one of your favorite books of 2018, because I'd love to know. And until my next video, guys, take care and happy reading. Thank you so much for watching. Bye, guys.